Hey guys, this is Paulo with Meditation Amsterdam. Today I want to talk about a subject that I haven't really heard out there before. And it's something that I have observed in myself. And it is also a general observation and perhaps some recommendations about shadow work and the battle or dance that ensues with coping mechanisms and especially addictions. And since I don't like to use clickbait, I might as well do honor to the title, in which I suggest that very often, in my experience, shadow work has triggered episodes in which I either develop more coping mechanisms, more addictions, more disassociation, or perhaps double down and engage even more in existing addictions that I was already engaging in as before. I was doing some emotional release or trying to figure out things that need to be dealt with internally. And I thought it was worth mentioning that, for a couple of reasons, if nothing else, to highlight the fact that this path, this mysterious path, right, is not that linear and is not. The way the mind as a system works is not as predictably direct as we would like it to be. In other words, to say that because I have now opened up a certain area of emotion in my body mind and release some of it, that all of a sudden the addictions that were underpinned by that trauma are going to disappear. We have to keep in mind that the reason we engage in addictive behaviors, if we for a moment park the situations in which we are chemically addicted or perhaps genetically inclined to a certain type of addiction, such as alcohol, that if they are really driven by trauma and emotional issues that we have, then when we open up the pain underneath the addiction, very often that will trigger not only episodes of release, but also periods of a new degree of openness and dysregulation that we have to learn to integrate and regulate. If we face periods of higher degree of dysregulation because we have created an opening in our body mind, it goes to reason that we need to double down on self-pacifying or self-regulating or self-appeasing tactics and mechanisms. And try as we may to make those wholesome or make them, spiritual or you name it, there's a limit to that as well. And when that limit is reached, it is almost unavoidable that we're going to revert back, if not double down, on self-soothing behavior of the addictive kind, which is perhaps not the most wholesome in nature. I've certainly experienced that. I have experienced that apparent paradox of why am I now going more into my coping mechanisms if I'm doing shadow work? And the reason is pretty obvious. I am more dysregulated, at least temporarily so, as a byproduct or as a direct product, in fact, of my shadow work. I am more open. I feel more vulnerable, more exposed. The the wounds are now being washed clean, but the what do you call that? Is it a scab? This is where my English sometimes meets its limit. So that whatever it is, that crust or that thing that grows over a wound. So when you rip that off, as you're cleaning the wound that starts to fall off, it could trigger temporarily more pain, right? So the pain that comes from cleaning the wounds can indeed expose us to moments of weakness, vulnerability, or you name it, which require that we double down on our self-regulating mechanisms. And if you ask me, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think, and I have seen individuals who, whilst doing shadow work, rather than asking, how can I pamper myself, nourish myself, regulate and calm myself, and feel like I'm, on the one hand, yes, opening up and cleaning all wounds and whatever, at the same time soothing myself by any means necessary. And when the wholesome means run their course, then you're going to start using unwholesome means, because ultimately the part of the job of the mind is to keep us self-regulated and keep a certain level of homeostasis, that we may not go completely psychotic or have a nervous breakdown or whatever, right? So we don't want that. And so I have worked with individuals who, rather than ask how do I nourish and soothe myself, try to do shadow work, and next to that they try to go on what is commonly called monk mode, right? Like either avoiding all kinds of sexual pleasure, they're fasting on food, they are dopamine fasting on their phone, and this and that and the other. I don't think that's particularly wholesome. There needs to be, as I said at the start of the video, the notion that we are in a dance with our psyche. And it is, if we see it as a fight, we're going to very quickly learn that we have absolutely no chance at winning. And it's going to become very painful very soon, as a matter of fact. Now, if we see it as a dance, we're still going to get trashed. There's no escaping that part. But we're going to tumble, and it can be even a little bit humorous and good, like, well, you know what? I'm binging on Netflix way more now that I'm doing shadow work, because I'm way too emotional. I can't be bothered with not watching TV or not engaging in doom scrolling or whatever. I kind of have to, right? So if you are generally oriented towards healing yourself, and you are doing the work, and your general intent and orientation is correct, you have to allow for that wiggle of ups and downs, and that sort of give and take with your system, as opposed to entering into a conflicted relationship with your psyche, because it's just not the point of what we're trying to do in general, and it doesn't work, right? So there's just no real reason to do that, other than fictitious expectations about an upward linear improvement curve in which we become healthier, our willpower grows inexorably upwards, and everything goes well. It simply doesn't work that way. It just doesn't, right? So now, of course, if we were very good at this, we would do as much grounding, embodiment, and general cultivation and establishing of an environment and a support system that makes addictions not the go-to place when we're doing this kind of work. So in the ideal world, we would increase our capacity for integration, and then just underneath that, we would be pushing the limit of the kind of things that we release. But it seldom calibrates so correctly. And what we're talking about here is when our capacity to integrate is superseded or exceeded by our capacity to release, right? So we release more than we can manage, to put it very bluntly, and now we have to somehow regulate. And if the wholesome somehows don't work, then we recur to something else, right? There's another element to this, which is that as we progress in this process, we get also better at listening and intuiting how far we can go and what it is that we need at any given point in time. So because this is a dynamic process, simply doing one thing, which is just release emotion, or simply grounding but never releasing, neither dose is going to do the trick. Is this kind of seesaw or dynamic balance in which we're trying to do a bit of both, and keep ourselves both as challenged as we can, but also keep ourselves as stable as we can. And that in itself needs to be learned. Very often in the beginning, people are very scared to touch their difficult emotions, or when they try, they just bounce off. And part of the reason for that is that they see the feeling of emotions and the entering of a difficult place as a very binary type of on and off switch. Either I touch it completely and I go up in flames, or I'm not touching it at all. Where in reality is much more like a volume knob or a dimmer switch. You can dial it. You can dial your level of discomfort and stay in what I call the Goldilocks zone of transformation, in which we are simmering at the right temperature for transformation. If we go over that, we bounce off. We lose our shit, right? And it doesn't work. And if we don't come close enough to the fire, there's not enough happening that our system is becoming healed. So having the right expectations about the process, knowing that doubling down on willpower and discipline is not always what is required, and often will create a kind of pressure cooker in which we altogether abandon the project of healing, because we see that suddenly we reverted massively back to addictions that we wanted to get rid of in the first place. And so having the right expectations is one thing. Learning to dial into discomfort, doing the work of grounding in an integration that is a general container to be able to process and integrate whatever we release, and learning how to listen when we need a little bit more push and when we need a little bit more comfort. All those are factors that we learn to manage the more we do this, and which make us more skillful and also generally kinder to ourselves. I didn't want to lead in this video with this whole be kind to yourself, right? Because kindness is always what we're trying to be towards ourselves, but the question is, what form does that need to take, and what are the operative actions or direction of our attention, so that kindness is doing its job correctly at the correct time, right? So be kind to yourself might be a little bit too generic. Understand that you'll slide back. Sure. But why? And can you do something about it? Should you even do something about it? Or should you allow yourself to simply slide, take that as part of the process, so long as your general orientation is correct? And there is no definitive answer to that, but there is a correct managing of expectations, and understanding that the process is not always as linear as we would have it be. Now, having said all that, I also wanted to make a quick observation about addictions in general. And that is that just as willpower during shadow work has a very limited value, willpower to deal with addictions also has an incredibly limited value. And to use, because the addictive behavior, just as any other behavior, is more a result or an outcome as opposed to a cause. So to deal with things at the level of outcome and invest our willpower there is a very poor investment of our willpower. We can invest all of our willpower in not engaging in an addictive behavior once, and all it has done was to prevent that one occurrence. But if we invest our willpower in redirecting our attention away from the craving and towards the source of the discomfort, in other words, if we invest our willpower towards understanding and feeling into whatever it is we're trying to escape through the coping mechanism, is infinitely more productive. And when we invest our willpower there is likely to be a host of avoidance tactics and coping mechanisms that will be addressed at once, and they won't be addressed only in a single instance, but they will be over time generally rendered redundant. They won't be necessary anymore because we have, in essence, fully processed the source and the root of the discomfort that was triggering those coping mechanisms, right? So this notion of how to invest our willpower and whether willpower is the right tool for dealing with addiction and with addictive behavior has less to do with the behavior itself and has to do with understanding that behavior is an outcome, and to invest willpower towards the investigation of the trigger itself. And that investigation can still be done even if the addictive behavior is triggered by episodes of shadow work release. But to engage in a war against the behavior is going to be very detrimental. Like I said, I think it creates a pressure cooker that at some point blows up because the mind simply doesn't work that way. And what we're trying to do in the bigger scheme of things is enter into a collaborative handshake with the mind, which in no form makes room for a contentious, that's the word that I was looking for earlier, a contentious relationship between our conscious awareness and our behaviors, right? So that is the essence of today's video, is having the right expectations, and from there using the right attitudes and tactics and learning what works over time when it comes to shadow work and the short-term effects that it can have on our need for avoidance or coping mechanisms because of the additional exposure that it creates towards deeper parts of ourselves. So I'm very curious to hear if you guys relate to what I just described in this video, and if you think that this content is worth liking, sharing, or the channel is worth subscribing to, then I invite you to do so. Thanks for watching thus far, and I'll be back with more videos pretty soon. Cheerio and bye-bye.